Hey everybody, today's episode is Shavon Lindley from Ion Learning. And this is about the most that I'll say for the whole episode, but she's a ball of energy and wisdom and learning, and you guys will be amazed. What do you think, Maurice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we went off in all kinds of directions, like lessons that you learned from hosting a podcast, stuff that you learned from founding a company and launching a new platform while being pregnant, or a thousand other things that we didn't even touch on that you just mentioned, and we just ran out of time asking about those two because we would have gone like 3-4 hours. But it's it's an amazing episode. It's definitely a woman and a company to follow and see why right now. All right, dear guys, let's get this started then, right?
Because really, what could go wrong once you press record, right?
Exactly, what could go wrong? It's all got to be very perfect. Hey everyone, the guy turning the back to us is my esteemed partner Russ. Then we have the most fantastic Shavon on. Do I say that too French or is that right?
Oh, I love it. Ooh, nice.
And myself, the ever so
wonderful, witty, charming,
Maurice,
curious. There you go.
Shavon, I'm very happy to have you on the show, not just because you have a fantastic jacket on that almost, depending on how I put my camera, matches my sweater. But I'm very happy to have you on. I'm very curious to learn from you, to learn about you. And so that's going to be an exciting episode, I'm pretty sure. So starting off, I'd like to go and ask you about your origin story, right? That's a question that I like. So tell us a little bit about you, what made you, right?
Well, I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to a Iranian Muslim immigrant father and a American Christian mother, which allowed me to experience like a really unique family dynamic around how to love and honor and value two varying different views on religion, seemingly, and what really kind of bonds them together, and ultimately as a family, what our core values are. And so that really shaped and really put into my DNA kind of inclusion and finding that for myself and then seeing how that integrates in with the world. So I would say that's been a really profound part, and education, like most Middle Eastern or Asian or any other cultures, you got to go to school, become a doctor or an engineer, similar philosophy was like just all you got to do is just do good in school. And so that I think education has been ingrained. And then for me, as I was just navigating into the corporate world, so I was a math major in college, and what do you do with a math degree? I was trying to figure it out. I'm like, I'm good with people. I've got this kind of magnetic personality in a way, and I really love numbers. And so I got into the financial services space. So that's where I kind of got started.
I'm pretty sure you skipped a couple of steps there. Whenever I talk to somebody with a math degree, I'm just at awe. Like, why? How did you get there? I can't relate, because I was really good at math until I decided to somehow in school in Germany, you have to take 2 focus classes, and I made one of them math. And then I was from top of the line to right at the bottom, where I just from one day to the other, it was like they switched to Japanese for all I care, right? I didn't understand a thing. So I got the heck out of there as soon as I could. So how did you end up in math with a math degree, and what got you there?
Well, I just loved math as a kid. It was what I was naturally best at. Started around 7th grade or so. I was just knocking out geometry homework in 3 seconds and getting top. Every other class I was not doing well in, but math for some reason was a breeze. I have no idea necessarily why. But being that, you're supposed to be an engineer or whatever, that's just what I thought I was supposed to do. So I applied for engineering school and went to engineering camp in high school to just like explore the type of engineering. And so I got into college for a degree in electrical engineering. And then I got into my first year and absolutely hated it beyond anything except for the mathematics of doing circuitry. And so I was just talking with a career counselor about how much I did not like this path. And they were like, why don't you just major in math then? I'm like, you can do that? Like, I just didn't even know you could do that. So that's how I got into it. It was just more doing what you're good at. And it was kind of a natural thing so I crushed math until junior, senior year, when it switched from equations and to number theory. And then I just failed miserably. I didn't fail. That's where the street smarts came in. I still got a 3.7 and did really well, but it was not because it was natural. It was because I hustled and like got everybody to help me to figure out how to do it. But my brain did not naturally go into number theory at all.
I bet that's where the personality took over, where you are able to bring together people and align with them and talk to them. Is that what took over at that point?
I think personality has always been there. I think that's just the core of, but I think it helped in knowing how to get and not being afraid to go and ask for help when I needed help, and getting people to sit with me in the library and show me how they got it done, and just, late nights in the library, just like drilling math, and you still get the grades, and pray for extra help if you can get it.
So let's jump forward to today. What does your day look like? What is it that you do to give the audience an idea of where you are right now and what it is? We just heard at the beginning, before the camera was on, that you just came back from Las Vegas, that you had an exciting day today as well. So give us an idea of what is it that you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ion Learning, and it's a peer learning platform where we take any course a company has and we turn it into this social and collaborative experience. So that way, no matter wherever the teams are, they get to complete training programs in small peer learning groups of 3 to 4. So they're building their peer network, they're cross-training each other, they're holding each other accountable to course completion, and they're building like real friendships and connection while they're learning new skills. And it's doing tremendous amount of good for them wanting to stay at the company longer, because now they have these support systems, and because they're completing training for the first time and really actually doing it, they're benefiting from what they're learning. And it's transforming their career paths and their growth and their confidence to be able to do their job better and to understand how the business works. Mm-hmm. So it's just really cool to see how, this idea that we had many, many years ago is now really having this impact. So I, as kind of the main spokesperson for this organization, am out there learning about what's coming down the pipeline. What do we need to be thinking about from a product, and what's going on in the economy, how companies are looking at things. So I was at Transform, which is it's only been around a couple of years, this conference, but it's really HR technology, people who want to be on the cutting edge, bleeding edge, and what are they really going through and stuff like that. So it was really great to get the voice of the customer. Who are the new players? How are things shifting? How should our product evolve to meet those needs? And then hopefully along the way, meet some potential clients too.
That is so interesting, because I just the other day read a Gartner report where they were talking about how do companies deal with the talents right now, because right now you're at a point where a lot of companies let people go. At the same time, everybody's fighting for the top talents. So how do you balance this out, right? And how do you make sure that you keep those guys that you want to keep while there's a certain unrest in a company? And then, because my company is that I work for is in the HR environment too. We offer benefits and perks here in Germany. And a lot of companies here are looking for how to retain their employees, right? And then and distinguish themselves from other companies when it comes to acquiring new talents. So I think what you're offering is extremely interesting. And I, quite honestly, haven't heard of a platform yet that does it the way that you guys do it. Is there a lot of competition in the market from just that are companies that are competing right with you, or are you a unicorn in terms of that you're unique in that market? Because I haven't heard of anything like that.
Yeah, no one's built a platform based on small group learning theory and modernized it for, remote global teams. So we are the first to do that. There are a lot of platforms that say that they have social learning or collaborative learning or cohort-based learning where you're not learning alone, you're going through things with groups. And those are great and fun, but I kind of compare it. So when they say they're a social learning platform, you're more of like a social media learning platform. I can like your video, I can comment on your video, but we're not really friends. Like, it's just like as close as I am to some of my Facebook connections. What we're doing is we have an algorithm that matches thousands of people and breaks a cohort of 1,000 into small groups of 3 to 4. These 3 to 4 people, like let's say we were in a group together, that's the universe. We are going to self-facilitate and support each other as we complete a program over an extended period of time. So from that perspective, it's done completely differently, but there are and have been innovations with trying to make it a little bit more social or doing live webinars on demand where you can have live facilitators and things like that. But something that, our product, when you look at a company, there's a lot. Training looks live training in a physical classroom. There's webinar training, there's micro e-learning. And then there's, of course, like learning that you do in the flow of work, like in a Slack message or whatever. So there's so much education that you can do, and there isn't one right way. So what we've done is say, look, curate your content from all of these and consolidate it. But what we're going to anchor it in is a proven science-based methodology of small group learning theory, and we're going to wrap it around anything you want to train. And we're going to anchor where after they learn a particular set of skills that they're going to have this really rich learning environment where they can learn from other people within your organization in different departments. So you can break down silos and all the other things that I've already done. So luckily there isn't anybody that's doing that yet. It's surprising to me. I thought 2 years ago, people are kind of circling it in a way, but they haven't figured out the mechanics of how to do it. And we've made some really bold, kind of crazy decisions in our product based on this methodology. You cannot progress in the course to the next module unless your group does all the content and you meet, period. So like, I can't Slack, you can't Slack, none of you can do that. Other people, if they've built a platform, they're trying to be so flexible for so many things. Like that's a critical business decision that you have to make. And so it's you can't just switch to that overnight because you have customers that already do it in all this other ways. So for us, I think that's helped us, get ahead and stay ahead.
That is very interesting, and I liked it because I remember years and years ago I once interviewed for a CMO position, and they were one of the reasons they were interested because I'd built up an e-learning with my now former company and so on, and they wanted to be all about e-learning, right? That was a big buzzword. I had a couple of interviews just because I somewhere mentioned something about e-learning. And everybody like jumped on this part and like, yeah, let's do this. And then when I told them like how difficult that is to, first of all, get the content done, right? And second of all, to have the engagement part, then they were all like, maybe we just get somebody inside. So I really like you. I really like your approach. So where do you get the content from? For the classes, is that self-generated by the students and by the companies, or is that something where you have the specialist in your company?
So when we partner with a company, they've already got a lot of times content libraries that they pay for, that they love, that they have access to for many different reasons. So we integrate with those systems. Companies create their own content. So their homegrown workshops and webinars, we integrate that content. And then we also have Ion Academy. So these are just a handful of really premium, highly sought after courses that tend to be gaps in organizations' expertise. So things like inclusive leadership development, emotional intelligence, purpose-driven leadership, EQ for leaders, things that are like, these things are critical for all talent at all levels. And it's really hard for people there's not a lot of really great content. And we've got really amazing kind of masterclass level content that they just get when they work with us. Yeah. So most companies start off and they get off the bat with like one of our courses, and then they quickly recognize the framework for learning that we've taught them is what they've been looking for that they didn't know existed. And so then they really quickly expand and add their own content in. And so that's when our product gets super sticky. And that's when we know that they've really bought in to the philosophy. And then we start to see that expand out.
That is fantastic. Again,
yeah. But to go on, so I'm to kind of add on that, and obviously I've got some ideas that we're working on right now from a content perspective, because we don't want to be a content house. Yes, I have a small team in-house. We create freaking amazing things. Yeah. We just, because we love it. But really, what's the future of creating content that is a bar that is beyond what corporate e-learning looks like today? Luckily, the bar is so low, it's really easy to like be above the bar. But like, let's really push the industry forward. And I think, generative AI is going to transform the content creation and side of this. So we're kind of exploring what that's going to look like with our platform to make content that does finally look like that's going to make this whole thing really, really easy. So I'm excited about how our product will kind of take advantage of that as we move forward, but we don't have that all figured out yet. That's fine. Start with the idea. It's good.
Yeah, you used one of our buzzwords, and that's crazy. It sounds a little crazy what you guys are doing there. Obviously.
I'm kind of betting that as generative AI gets into this kind of content creation space, that it's going to look a lot like the content does today, except with cool animations and interesting voices and music. But it's still going to be, hi, this is Sherman from the accounting department, and to enter your expenses, you have to go to, and it's going to be the same boring, awful content, but just really cool looking, right? Very exciting. So hopefully you can
that'll be better than what's out there, right? Yeah. That'll be better. That'll help raise the bar at least a little, but we'll see how long. I'm fascinated by that, and I'm really torn because I'm at this conference. I'm seeing it with my own eyes, how quickly you can align, a lot of HR practices using generative AI in this way, but companies are so slow to move and we're just trying to get them to like get peer learning groups wrapped into the course. Nevertheless, like all this other stuff. And so, do you build a company for 20 years from now when companies might be more ready and you just like raise enough cash so you can sustain until the world really evolves? Or you just work with the handful of super innovative companies? Or do you work with the ones that really need the most help and are probably going to get you a nice 25-year career because they're slow to move? I don't know.
So who are your customers today? Are they more the smallish companies, or are you shooting for the very big ones? I see you have Walmart as one of your customers. So
yeah, I mean, I would say in the beginning when we were just getting started and like getting Walmart walked up to me at a trade show booth at a training conference. I didn't like prospect and hunt, literally just came, and it took 2 years to close and all that good stuff. So typically we're not shooting for the largest companies in the world to work with, but that we have found our just right client has, 5 to 10,000 plus employees, and they're fast growing. So they have to innovate because they're hiring people so quickly. Regeneron is a great example. During the pandemic, they were innovating to take some of their research that they had done in one area and adapting it to COVID-19 to help create some remedies there. And it freaking worked. And they grew like crazy and promoted 3,000 managers remotely. And their original manager training was a 2.5 day in person, and then they try to turn it into a webinar series and it doesn't work. And so, those companies are forced to innovate because of the speed of growth. And so those have been the types of companies that we have had the most success with, that grow with us, that have landed and expanded and used in many, many different verticals. So we support them in multiple ways. And so we've seen that with like Envision Healthcare. They've got 60,000 employees, or Argo that's recently been bought out and they're around 5,000. But we've got some interesting new use cases. Like we just rolled out in a credit union, but we did the whole company. And, they've got physical locations and then they have, some remote. And so it's just fascinating to see our product evolve and meet the needs of like a 250. That's like our smallest client we've ever had, to like 60,000 healthcare trying to train, frontline nurses and senior medical directors to like neuroscientists over here. But at the end of the day, every company is trying to figure out, how do I help our employees stay? To go back to your original thing about retention, right? That's the biggest thing. I can work for any company. Yeah. I can go anywhere in the world. I can work remotely. I can do all of these things. What gets me to stay is that I'm being invested in by my company so I can continue to grow my career path. And I have people that I like at work that I'm friends with. Those are what gets people to stay at a company. And so fortunately, our platform helps people facilitate and create these deep relationships with their peers. I can't promise you a best friend, but I can promise that you're going to meet people that you can call and ask for help. And that may lead to a best friend at work. And there's just a ton of research on, the power of that too.
Fantastic. So how did you build your own company?
Well, wasn't planning on it. It was, as I was successful in the financial services space. So I got my math degree. I got into financial services. I loved helping families figure out, how much money they needed to save to be able to send their kid to college, plan for their retirement. And God forbid something happened and one of them were to die, that like their family would be totally taken care of. It was a super fulfilling job. And I was a trusted partner and coach to them. And I helped educate them around how to be successful and to like go through massive shifts in the economy. So I loved that. And I thought I was going to do that forever. And so I started kind of moving up and building an office and having advisors and opened up own firm. And, but I worked predominantly with men, and I also was working 12-hour days and I was getting sick all the time. I had bronchitis. I was still like unhealthy from all these, anxiety and ADHD and asthma and, a slew of other issues that were just like, yes, I might be successful on paper with the amount of money that I am making, but something is broken within my soul, in a way. And at that time I started, it was very fortunate. Me and who would eventually become my husband and another partner in the firm, had this opportunity to host a financial talk radio show program. And we were like, cool, let's do that. And so we figured out how to like host a 5-day a week, like on the real radio, like actual radio show. The market ended at 1:00. The markets closed at 1:00 in San Diego. We were on air from 1 to 2. And then we had this brilliant business building idea that we should turn one of the day's segments. So Wednesdays was called the CEO show. And we brought executives on air and we told their story. And I kind of, for the most part, owned that because I ended up realizing that I really enjoyed interviewing people and extracting wisdom from them and what they just as similar like you are, right? Mm-hmm. And helping them connect the dots. But what I ended up realizing was that I was being coached personally every single week by these people around how they were able to grow in their career. And I ended up kind of discovering that they shared commonalities amongst them, over 300 interviews in 3 years. And I was like, these aha enlightening moments that then I would go and apply it. And then I would see this massive change. And so I just was inspired at that point. And then I had met my co-founder, and, in our current companies, we weren't high enough up in the company yet to get all this cool high level leadership development training programs. We were given e-learning content that we had to consume. And so we were super isolated and alone, and didn't have anybody. We were both in very male dominated fields. And so it was just like, okay, this is what people need to learn so that all talent, we can unlock the potential of all talent at all levels. But if we just roll it out as e-learning, people are going to still be alone, and they may not do it because there's no accountability and there's no support system. Yeah. So how can we rethink, but there's not enough coaches, and it's too expensive, and there's not enough mentors that look like us anyway either. So there was just this model that seemed like it was just going to take 100 years for us to get there. And how can we solve this in a really cost-effective, scalable way? And that's where the idea of like, well, what about if I could just learn from the person to my left or my right, or just one level above me or below me? Like we all have so much that we have within us. And to share that others can learn from our unique experiences. But what's missing is a psychologically safe environment where people feel comfortable to open up and tell their story. And so if I can do that, if we can create that container and guide it with education, so that way these people, it's not like, what are we going to talk about today? And, so we guided them with content, and then we gave them facilitation guides and discussion prompts and all of these things that alleviated all of the friction. And then we also learned slowly, but it was like the very early stages of our algorithm that we developed to form these groups. What were the criteria necessary for these peers to feel like they could open up? And so that was all of like the early days. And then to kind of connect this to Walmart. So we built the course and we put together these peer groups. So we were using 4 different technology systems. We were a total service business, basically using an LMS and a content management and an email system and, all these things to make it work. And then we get into Walmart. And then Walmart does, the first year they said, let's just do a pilot and we won't go through security, but let's see if we like it. It was amazing. They were like, perfect. Year 2, now you have to go through procurement. It's our first time, 50-page master services agreement. I mean, it was like $5,000. I'm like, I had like no money, but, I'm like, I'm not going to say no to Walmart. We get through the whole legal. Then they go through security review of the platform, of the LMS that we were using. And it was supposedly I found it at a conference. They have a massive booth. They probably paid $100,000 for this booth. They do all these other things, but it failed Walmart security tests. And I'm 5 months pregnant with my second kid. And I'm like, I'm going to die. Like, we did not come this far to fail on somebody else's mistakes, Yeah. But I had like nothing left to give at that point. And my co-founder was like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do market research. I'm going to go find another platform. And then she came back and she was like, the market sucks. Like something is wrong with everything. Yeah. We can totally do this better. And oh, by the way, I have a cousin that is an engineer and we spent all weekend building the wireframes. And here's the idea that I have. And I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, you are nuts. And at first I told her, no, like, just like, what are we doing? Just find another platform. But then as she, persistent little one she's so great. And then, within about a week, I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's like, what do we have to lose? We know everything that Walmart needs. We can build a complete platform on their specifics. So we launched the platform to Walmart and 2 other companies that I had already sold. And so they didn't care what LMS we were using. We all of a sudden had our own platform. So we just swapped it out 2 weeks after I gave birth to my second kid.
Nice.
And that's how we became a tech company in 2018. So, you know, it's nuts. When I thought about this podcast, and I'm like, what is the craziest things that it's the like perseverance through those where you're hitting a wall, you know, it shouldn't have to be that hard. And like, those are the moments, if you can seep into that uncomfortable moment and really try to figure out, like, what is this trying to do? Is this trying to stop me, or is it trying to get me to evolve and like push beyond what I think is possible? And when somebody as like an angel that she showed up in my life to show that this product could be a technology platform, like that's inspiration. That's like divine inspiration. And so it's to believe that and to trust that and to continue going, even though we had already been at this, trying to prove this since 2015, you know, and had already promised that we were going to have made all the money already, you know, but now I got to go build a platform, you know, and oh, by the way, have a kid and try to be present in their life and, you know, have a relationship with your significant other and all the other things. You know, I think that's the craziest part.
Yeah. So how do you deal with those moments? I always call them the Sunday night moments, where truth comes and finds you, and you have to deal with it. How do you deal with it in that situation that you were in, right? Pregnant, 5 months, a big customer that has a lot of expectations set in you, but also you have a lot of expectations for yourself, right? Which might be much tougher than whatever anybody outside could do. So how do you deal with that in that quiet moment where you think like, holy crap, what did I do? Right? How did we get there?
Building your own business is like a mirror for every self-limiting belief you could possibly ever have. And it reflects back to you. And if you're paying attention and you're willing to see the greatest opportunities to grow and step up to the next level. And so it's being able to recognize those as I am in the fire, and I'm in the fire because I'm getting ready to transform into something to the next level. And so I think that every time I thought my life was over and I was like crying myself to sleep and didn't know why and how it would be so hard, in hindsight, it was our biggest moments of growth. So now when I rub up against that, like today, we are rubbed up against some friction right now with a new potential client that, you know, there's hard. And then there's just like, is it worth it? Is it truly worth it? And what's the sacrifice that we're going to make as a small business by saying no? And I've never done that before because we've just said yes and just go with it, right? But now it's like, I think we're going to say no to a crazy company.
Yeah.
And I don't really know, but I know that this uncomfortableness is like what happens in me physically now because I'm so attuned to this. And I have a deep like meditation practice and breath work and a lot of things that I do. We can talk about that. That's a whole other crazy part of my life. But like I physically know in my body when something is right or wrong. And it is something that guides me on a daily basis that I know if I'm operating from my heart or not, you know. And I think that as long as you are doing that with your products, especially a product that's meant to be both very human-centered and around relationships and building connection, like we have to live and breathe our values. So our values have been the anchor, you know, integrity. Back in the day with Walmart, I promised them that we were going to have a program that was going to help these underrepresented talent get the peer support they were going to need and the education to help them grow. I wasn't going to go back and say no to that because we had already promised that. I just had to go solve this other problem. And luckily my co-founder was able to do that. So I think like following through with your word has made us stay as long as we have in all of those early days, because like, I don't want to, too many companies depend on us. People depend on on this, and it's helping them like their job more, like enjoy what they're doing and pushing them. And it's like dissolving titles, and they're humanizing this work experience. And it's very motivating.
Where did you take the strength from to do that? Because again, the situation that you were in is tough, and I've seen it from the outside looking in, or being the partner for my wife, right? Being in an executive role, bearing a child, and all of that going on. But how did you deal with that? Where do you get the strength from to do so?
I have been so fortunate to have, like, my family believes in me, like they have believed in me from the beginning. They may not get what I do. Like, I think they're starting to understand it more and more, but I've never had them say, no, this is going to fail, like they want to take care, and they're like, oh, you could always go back to financial plan. I'm like, it's not happening. Like, I know but they totally, truly believe in, and some of my first investors. And so I think that helps, like knowing that my husband is like, shoot for the moon, and I've got your back, and like all of those, and my like friend, like that part makes it where I can take risks. And a lot of people don't have that. And I don't think I recognized or understood that earlier on, and how important that was for me being willing to sustain the amount of trauma. And it's trauma with like a big T that it takes to like iterate over and over again and fail so many times to like finally get to a part now where people are like, oh yeah, this makes sense. I totally get it. Like, but I had faith. It was just from that. And then, cultivating that and that was all helpful before I had it within myself. So now I have that within myself, but that took a really long time to get here,
Fantastic. You mentioned your radio show. You mentioned essentially what could be called the training sessions that you received from all the CEOs that you were interviewing. So what are the top 2 lessons that you took away from those interviews? Or 2 that you remember right now at all?
Oh, I remember, because we built a whole course on it and we still sell it to this day. So
course here.
Click the button.
Yeah, click to buy now.
Honestly, I think one of them, because we still, even in that original course that we created and future courses that we have built, it's at multiple places throughout it, but it's understanding what your core values are and doing an actual exercise. Like, people are like, what are your core values? And they're like, they try to make up something. It's like, have you done an actual exercise where you have determined it and written it down and like thought through, where did they come from? Where did that come from? And understanding your personal story and how it shaped who you are and how you're showing up today as a leader is fascinating, and it really helps understand your character and all of that. And so when you are feeling frustrated or angry or annoyed or bitter or whatever, it's typically because you're working outside of your core values. And so those are signs that say, okay, well, how can I shift and where? And so then, in the program, so I learned this there. It was like, well, then you have to align your personal values to your company's values. And then once you align to your company's values, you align to your work projects that you're working on every day. And what percentage of your time are you working on things that are aligned to your values or are not? And of course, it's not going to be 100%. Like, there's always going to be parts of your job. But if you're doing 70% of your time working on things that you do not fulfill you are totally going to feel frustrated and annoyed and bitter and all of those things. And so then it becomes cultivating the skill to learn how to recognize that. And then how do you make shifts and have conversations potentially with your manager about that, and how you can maybe get a project on that is more fulfilling, and or does it maybe have to be outside of work, maybe, so I think that's one that's like stood the test of time and should be done on an annual basis, and is really, really helpful and keeps you like very clear on making decisions.
Okay.
So that would be one.
That would be one. So what is it?
It's only one. Right?
I'm not letting you go that easy.
I mean, there's so many, but I would say the other one, just to kind of take it to a whole other side. And I would say dealing with difficult people and managing the line when people say things that are potentially offensive, and you need to speak up, and you want to say something in a way that's not going to like make you sabotage your career, but it helps you understand each other better and helps establish a healthy line around what's appropriate or not appropriate, and particularly as a woman, and it just like happens all day long, every day, in like different types of, less now than in the past, but like, knowing how to speak up in those moments is a skill that takes a lot of time to cultivate, but it is totally possible. And it's not as hard as we think it is, because if we give like learning a framework around how to have those types of conversations. So we don't need to like dig into all of that. Like I ended up doing an entire TEDx talk on it. So you can like teach it to you in 12 minutes if you want to go see it. But like that skill is because then people know what your correct boundaries are, and you can communicate effectively. And then you realize that so many people have no idea the impact that they're making with their words. And when you approach it in a way where you're not like trying to call them out for being something, like you come in super open and just trying to share how what they did impacted you, and that you don't think it was their intention to do that, and like giving them an opportunity to share their perspective, you learn so much about people, and it really bonds you at that time. And it's really fascinating how these moments of real conflict and real like things that can trigger fight, flight, or freeze in people on a regular basis can be really profound experiences that bond you with that person in like a crazy way if you're like willing to go through the fire.
Yeah, I think that is very interesting, because for one, you always have the first response that you get a lot of times is, yeah, I didn't mean it like that. You know how I meant it, right? That kind of thing. And then on the other side, I think it's especially what we've been seeing in the past 3-5 years or so, is whenever somebody said something that really didn't mean it in any bad way, shape, or form, that they now see themselves canceled, right? And they immediately get pushed into a drawer where they're like, no, shoved into a box where they're like, no, that's not who I am, and where you almost have to help them not to really find a home in that box, right? To show them, hey, listen, you cannot say that, right? You're hurting people, because the context of the words that you mean usually happen in a context like such and such, and not everybody going to react the way I react, right? So I think that's really, really interesting, and should be one of your courses, which it probably is already.
I picked the two lessons that have stood the test of time and actually have been infused in a few, because they're that powerful of lessons, and they transcend because they're just super, super powerful skills that can like anchor you. Know your purpose, stay aligned, like don't like use these moments of conflict to like help understand each other better, but to create healthy boundaries in communication. It's really.
How do you stay self-centered like that? Where do you where you manage the energy? Because you have anxiety on the one side, you have super excitement on the other side, and that's just a push and pull that happens constantly. How do you center yourself where you say like, okay, I don't get too up, I don't get too low? How do you manage that?
it has been a long journey, like the health and kind of spiritual and personal side has been one of the most extraordinary parts about this whole process. And, you know, I diagnosed ADHD in high school and got on, you know, was taking Ritalin, and then got anxiety and was on Lexapro and had acid reflux and was taking this medication and had every side effect known to man, and which kind of led to like eating disorders. And I also had scoliosis and asthma and like all these other things I mentioned earlier. But I hitting those walls along the way and not being afraid to like tell people when I wasn't feeling well. So when I walked in one day, so this is when I was in financial planning, and we had a physical office, and I walked into the elevator and I had like bronchitis for the fourth like month in a row. And I was on my like fourth episode of antibiotics, which I just like called the doctor, I'm like, just throw in a Z-Pack. Like, I'm sick again. I know it's hit it. I didn't even go in anymore. I just was like, send me the meds. And I walk in, and this guy that worked across the hall said something like, how you doing? And normally I would just be like, I'm fine, I'm good, you know, but this time I'm like, I'm terrible. I'm sick again. And then he just made this like flippant comment, like, oh, I used to get sick all the time. And then I started going to the chiropractor. And then I'm like, what's the chiropractor? Has anything to do with like health and wellness? You know, I get like, obviously I had been going to the chiropractor with scoliosis. I literally wore a brace and went to school with the brace on my body for a year. That's awful. But so like, I know chiropractors, but like in that way of, from a wellness perspective, it's like, yeah, I go to this one. So I didn't get bronchitis again.
Yeah.
You know, just by getting adjusted. So, you know, I think that finding and recognizing like how we take care of ourselves, that was like layer one. And then I wanted to have babies, and I had acid reflux, and you're not supposed to take the medicine if you're pregnant and acids. And I'm like, I'm going to die. I literally can't eat anything, you know? And so I just talked about that to other people and went to all these different doctors and kind of like all sorts of things. And then I just was at dinner and said something about how this meal is really going to hurt later. And someone said, why? And they were like, oh, I went gluten-free and it solved my problems. And I'm like, gluten-free, what are you talking about? I don't even know what that word means. This was like 12 years ago. But I went gluten-free, solved my problems. Yeah. And then I went organic, and then my ADHD went away, my anxiety went away. And then I started, long, crazy story, but I ended up having a meeting with the CEO of Transcendental Meditation for like a financial services thing. And I was in a meeting with Bob Ross, the CEO, with my partner, and we were talking about this big strategic partnership thing, and he was like, this sounds great, do you meditate? He's like, straight up. And I was like, no. And he's like, I don't do business with people that don't meditate. He just was like, straight up, like, this is just the bar that we do. And but he was so gracious, and he said, I want to give you a coach, and I'd love for you to get trained if you're open to it in transcendental meditation. And so then 4 days, like thousands of dollars that he gifted us in like this great benevolent, you know, jest of, I would love for you to have this skill. And it was just it completely transformed my husband and I's relationship, which was like not at the best at that particular moment. It got us communicating. We were like therapy with meditation, and just, oh my God, all of the stress and anxiety. And then like having cleared out, you know, the wellness side and the like mental and kind of spiritual side. It was like all of those paths were clear. Over time, I've stopped drinking now too. So there's just like, so when you ask this question around like, how do I find peace? I find peace because like, I'm very diligent every single day. You know, if I want to take care of all of these sides of me on a regular basis. So yesterday when I am at this conference all day in Vegas, right? I'm coming, this is where you're like, this chick really is crazy.
All kind of people.
But like, I come back like I come back to my hotel room and I center into like a meditative thought, and I say out loud, like, I want to call back all of the energy that I've left out into my physical, into my emotional, into my spiritual. I like literally call that energy back to myself. And you can feel like the cleansing of all of this, like, debris, like just energetic debris that we collect by just amplify it times a million, being in Las Vegas, just walking down the floor for 5 minutes, nevertheless, like pitching your business 85 times in 4 hours. So those are the things that I do to just like constantly make sure that I'm checking in with myself. And so before I transition today to being a parent, I will meditate for 20 minutes before I go home. And that will allow me the space to like consolidate what happened throughout today. And it'll allow me to transition so that when I get back, I'm not like, oh my God, I forgot to do 85 things, like that whole, that transition is really hard. So I want to be really present for them when I have that time, and then try to separate it as much as possible.
Hey, listen, I think we could go all the way to 90 minutes, but we probably shouldn't. I'd rather have you come back and we can give it a second part. But there's one more question I would like to ask before poor Russ had no chance to ask any questions whatsoever.
It's all right. It's all good.
One more question I would like you and to answer, and that is, if you would meet your, let's say, 16-year-old self, what would you tell her with everything that you know today? What would the message be that you give her? Like, look, Shavon, there's one thing that you need to know, and that is what?
That the power lies within her, that you don't have to walk in other people's shoes. You don't have to depend on others to save you. That all of the abilities that you need are within yourself, and that it will open up in kind of the right timing, really clear, easy, and fast. As long as you are, if it is meant for you, it will happen. And if it is not, it is trying to tell you that it's not the right thing or something needs to change. And so just trust in yourself as early as possible would have been really helpful.
I think that is a fantastic ending to everything that you just taught us in many ways, right? I'm very curious to see where you are progressing, what your company will be doing. I'm definitely going to look at your company from a professional perspective, like if that is something that we could use here in Germany, and make it part of our benefits program, for example. And yeah, let's be in touch and follow up in a little bit of time to see how that crazy moment, if you said no to that customer, right? That is something I'm working on right now for our company too, to maybe cancel a couple of customers, right? Something that we learned in another episode. Yeah. So
yeah, and all of this, I've got at least another hour of questions. Just that's come out of this hour of
you didn't get to answer to ask what.
No, that's okay. I got a ton now that have just come up in addition to the ones I wanted to ask. So you have to come back, Shavon.
Thank you so much. It has been an amazing pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the next episode already, and take great care of you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shavon.